All right.
I don't know what's happening. Here we go. I'm gonna just try to get started here. Good afternoon, good evening, welcome. Hey, Justin, nice surprise. Welcome, welcome. We're gonna get started in just a minute here, waiting for some team folks to join in. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, who you are, what your role is, where you're zooming in from. Welcome, welcome for all that are joining. All right. Excited to see all these folks. Trying to wait for a few more people from the team to join, and then we'll get started.
All right.
I'm so excited to have you all here with us tonight. All right, so as we're waiting for people to join, just want to welcome you to our second webinar in a series that we're doing on teaching, leading and teaching in learner-centered communities. And our practices for how we engage during this time is to be fully present as much as we can. It's the evening for some of us, so we're trying to manage our nightly duties. It's midday for others. Maybe you need a snack, whatever you need to do, take care, but try to be present. We're here to listen, to learn. And please ask questions in the chat. There will be a Q&A at the end of our time together, but if you ask questions throughout, maybe we'll be able to answer them throughout as well. We'll try our best. And please keep yourself muted. And if you have not yet introduced yourself, again in the Zoom, please tell us your name, your role, and where you're zooming in from. Welcome, welcome to everyone. All right, so I just want to welcome you again and introduce myself. My name is Laureen Adams-Tutu. I'm the Senior Director of Professional Learning with Ghana ASCD. Ghana ASCD was founded in 2017 and is an affiliate of ASCD and ISD in the States. And our work is really to support educational leaders and educators and all educationalists across the country in both public and private settings. And we do that through professional learning opportunities, through webinars such as this, through consultations. We've just finished a consultation with the Ministry of Education, the National Educational Leadership Institute pilot, which was a wonderful success. And many of you know us now and are part of our community because you heard of or attended the International Educators Summit last July. We are having it again next July, so save the date, July 18th through 20th, and I'll talk about that a bit more at the end of our webinar. And actually, our two brilliant presenters tonight were presenters at the summit as well. So I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce our guests. I'm super excited right now. And then we will hear from each of them. We'll do a round of Q&A. And we'll close out with some of our upcoming offerings for you all. So as I mentioned already, we've dedicated this year's webinar and face-to-face professional development series to leading and teaching in learner-centered communities. That means we have to center our learners and adjust our teaching and leadership to meet their needs. Assessment must also meet the needs of our learners so that it makes their learning visible and provides them with clear feedback to guide their learning. So when I say I'm truly overjoyed to spend this evening with my sisters in Deeper Learning to discuss the type of assessments that we believe are critical to supporting learners to attain the higher order thinking skills, learning dispositions, and collaboration skills and competencies needed to succeed in 21st century work and civic life. I have had the great pleasure of working with both of these brilliant women in multiple organizations and capacities over the years. They are both committed to liberatory. Introduce Charity Moran, whom I first met and worked with at PBL Works. Bear with my unstable internet, you all. Can you hear me? I'm looking at faces. Is it working? Okay. It's saying unstable across, so I'm not sure. All right. So Charity is a former geometry teacher, and she currently serves as national faculty with PBL Works and is the founder of idoschool.com, training educators nationally and internationally, meeting a variety of school program development needs. Over the past 18 years, Charity has served as a new tech network school development coach, elementary Title I coordinator, alternative programs and math coach, adjunct professor for Relay Graduate School of Education, and culturally responsive teaching curriculum director for Adaptive X. A lot of words and amazing titles. With I Do School, Charity's work and research revolve around establishing a safe space for teachers to innovate and develop the skills to decolonize curricula, build culturally responsive learning experiences, and debunk myths around Black males. Together with PBL Path, Charity has facilitated place-based learning projects at Whitney Plantation, expeditions and experiences crafted for both teacher and student to experience, learn from, and appreciate the place and its history. You can learn more about place-based learning in their book, Place-Based Learning, Connecting Inquiry, Community, and Culture. It's a beautiful book. Welcome, Charity. All right, let me introduce Alcine Mumby. Alcine was a school leader who almost 20 years ago, I'm aging us, ushered me into the world of deeper learning, project-based learning, performance assessment, and portfolio defenses, among many other phenomenal humanizing practices. Alcine is a dedicated educator who has spent the last 25 years teaching and leading traditional and charter public K-12 schools all over the country, that country being the US. She currently supports and coaches district and school leaders to develop high-quality performance assessment systems that center student-led demonstrations of learning and metacognition. Prior to coaching, Alcine taught humanities at one of the first small schools in the Bronx, where project-based learning and portfolio defenses served as the foundation of instruction. Afterward, Alcine became a founding principal of Envision Academy, which is where I worked with her, in Oakland, and an administrator in several small, middle, and high schools in Atlanta and DC, and a leadership coach in DC, Charlotte, and Philadelphia. Alcine earned her BA in English education from NYU and a master's in curriculum studies and teacher education from Stanford University. When she's not listening to podcasts or catching a flight or driving all over the country, Alcine enjoys working towards BAE Bay, Best Auntie Ever status, with adorable niece and 5 nephews. Welcome, Charity and Alcine. I'm deeply inspired by you both. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charity and have you start us off by talking a little bit about formative assessments, how they differ from more traditional assessments, and how we use them in project-based learning contexts.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Make sure. Is the slideshow showing? Yes, thumbs up. Awesome. So it's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And so welcome. Let's kind of jump into it. Like introduced, I'm Charity Moran, and I'll be guiding you through some of the effective ways to assess and support student progress during their projects. And so just to kind of start off with an introduction to formative assessment in PBL, There's some keywords here on the phrase, and don't worry about capturing this. There's a link to a resource later that has the deck in there so that you can kind of see what's going on. But formative assessments are indeed powerful tools in project-based learning because they allow us to provide feedback and make adjustments, not just at the end, but throughout the course of a project. Unlike traditional assessments, which measured strictly the final outcomes. And so formative assessments focus on the learning journey in essence, helping students develop those critical skills along the way. So I really like to start here with this list because a lot of this should perhaps, hopefully, affirm some of the practices that you're already doing in your classrooms, whether within a project or not. So checkpoints, supporting those critical skills. So let's talk now about some of those differences between formative assessments and traditional assessments. And the thumbs down is there, but that's only to just show the juxtaposition between traditional and formative because we do want to really focus on this sort of shift on how formative assessments can be leveraged to do more of this empowerment of our students. And so one big difference between formative assessments and traditional assessments is that formative assessments aren't just about grading. They're ongoing checkpoints that support student learning through the feedback and through the adjustments that we make. So there are strategies for formative assessments, but then it's more important to see based on those analyses and reflections on those assessments, what actions do we take? Right? So this approach helps students not only stay on track, but it also encourages this deeper understanding. It encourages this autonomy and student self-assessment that really gets at some of those critical thinking, problem solving, and self-reflection skills. So we're going now beyond the content because of the way that we're building in the formative assessments and leveraging them in this ongoing way throughout the project. On this slide, what you see here are some examples of formative assessments in action, right? So we have things that work both within and without outside of a PBL environment. So that real-time feedback, peer assessments, self-reflections, and then not forgetting those traditional tools, but thinking about how we leverage quizzes, exit tickets, and tests. How do they serve to inform instruction in a formative way instead of just being this summative result and analysis at the end? Journals and learning logs, as well as collaborative discussions. And then most importantly, I love this idea of rubrics because rubrics kind of objectify the process. Now there's no big, question about how are we going to be evaluated or what's a 4 or what's a 5. It gives an opportunity to have specific indicators so that when we do the self-reflections with students, when we have students do peer-to-peer assessments or even invite an outside expert in to help us think about giving feedback to the students, we can do it all anchored in the rubric that's standards aligned and very objective in terms of providing key indicators and verbiage that we can use when giving this feedback. So it's not just a grading tool, rubrics, but rubrics are also an important tool to support the formative assessment in PBL. So there's this notion of sometimes we get to the end of a project and it's like, oh my God, they didn't learn anything. These products don't look anything like what I thought they should. It happened to me several times before I got to this idea of really thinking about formative assessment. So to shift from they didn't learn anything to they demonstrate everything, and even I challenge teachers when we're designing projects to really use formative assessments so intently and so intensely and strategic in varied ways, such that by the time we get to the end of the project, everybody, even the students, know what their score is going to be on the rubric because we've leveraged it so many different ways throughout the course of the project that they can even tell you where they've grown, where they were at the beginning of the project according to the rubric, and then through the strategies, how they grew. So going from they didn't learn anything to they demonstrate everything is really one of those heavy hitting, impactful moments that we get from formative assessments. I can think about one particular project that just earlier today I was supporting a teacher with, um, where we finally got them to the point where we designed those frequent check-ins and frequent peer-to-peer feedback to guide the students who seem to be struggling to stay on track. So by the end of the project, which was our report out this morning, this one particular student had taken so much ownership over his work and made so many remarkable improvements that he was like, I'm just going to turn this in, but I already know what I made, right? I already know how I grew over this project. And that was really a testament to how this teacher intently dug in and leveraged some formative assessment strategies. And so there's a QR code here and a bit.ly link. But like I also said, we have some correspondence that'll come out later with links to all of these resources. But if you scan this QR code, it should take you to a download with some helpful resources and tools, as well as rubrics, specifically designed with project-based learning in mind for formative assessments. This toolkit includes checklists, rubrics. There's a tool in there that it has a rubric maker that helps you. You go through, you select the standards, and it helps craft a rubric for you. There's a rubric for rubrics that I really love that gives you some ideas on how you're already using rubrics and where you might strengthen in how you use rubrics and design rubrics. There's also some resources there to help you structure assessments and provide students with clear expectations so that we can track back to those expectations that we have. So you can download this after the session for some more ideas as well. And I'm going to also share some of my contact information here. In terms of my WhatsApp, there's a link tree there. If you scan the QR, it will bring you to a Storehouse page, a link tree page that has all of the ways to get in contact with me, because I would love to continue to keep in touch as you continue on your formative assessment journey, your PBL journey. And that's all I have for now. I look forward to tapping in with you and answering some of those questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Charity. Please, can you drop all of that information in the chat for us as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So Charity just gave us a beautiful introduction to some formative assessment strategies. And because we're talking about different ways to assess for learning, we're going to turn it over to Alcine, who's going to talk about performance assessments and what are the key attributes that make high quality performance assessments. And for those of us who participated in Nelly, we got to work with performance assessments in our program, so you're familiar. And for those of you who are just learning about it, you are in luck because Alcine very passionate about this and look, she's laughing already, and is an expert in high quality performance assessment. So Alcine, welcome again, and thank you.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you all. I'm going to lovingly take over and share my slides. As Laureen shared, I am deeply passionate about performance assessment for all of the reasons that Charity mentioned around how assessments, formative and, when you design them well, you can design high quality formative assessments that also give you the information to understand the student's learning journey, not just at the end. So we want, oh, y'all are not seeing my screen? No, okay, let's try it again. Okay, are y'all seeing that now? Okay. Hmm. There we go, I think. Okay. So at Envision Learning Partners, at Envision Education, we believe that in order for you to really transform learning experiences for students as well as teachers, you first need to define what is the learning you're aiming for. What are the 21st century skills that you really want the learner to be able to demonstrate during their learning journey, whether that means it's just a PBL or project, or whether it's a whole 4 years of high school or a longer learning journey. And once you define that learning journey, then you have to design an assessment system that helps you measure those skills. So for example, if you say you want kids to be strong collaborators and critical thinkers, then you should design assessments within your system that help students to demonstrate that so you can have the evidence of that. And so I want you to think about what Charity said about they didn't learn anything to moving to, they demonstrated everything, okay? And then finally, once you have defined the learning, the 21st century skills that you want the learner to be able to embody, and then you design the assessment system that gives you evidence of those skills, then you can think about what are the ways of teaching and being, what are the school structures, what are the processes that lead to success in your learning system for students as well as the teachers and the leaders within that system. So that is how we believe deep transformative change really happens for learners when you go through this process. And I want to say that you don't have to start at step one. We just want you to start. So start somewhere. And so I'm actually going to give you some keys to starting at step 2. And this can be for any kind of performance assessment that you want. We love analogies and we love concrete ideas here at Envision Learning Partners. So when you think about high quality performance assessment, I want you to think about Lego blocks. Okay, this is a Ghanaian Canadian artist, and he takes all black Lego blocks, Lego pieces, those little toys that some of us played with as kids, or many of us stepped on when our kiddos didn't put them back where they belong. And he uses all black Lego blocks to create these beautiful pieces of art. And I want you to think about your performance assessment as a beautiful piece of art that you are going to build using different kinds of Lego blocks. So what are those Lego blocks, right? So as you can see, we have 5 Lego blocks. These are the 5 basic building blocks that will get you a high quality performance assessment. And we call a performance assessment the demonstration, going back to what Charity said, they demonstrate everything, and the evaluation, going back to what Charity said around the rubrics of applied skills that can be taught and learned. So that means you have designed a learning journey for the kiddos to go through, and you have designed an assessment experience where they are able to show what they have learned. Okay. So I like to think that you could also use these building blocks to create high quality formative assessments. Maybe not all of them apply, but I actually think most of them should apply to any size, grain size, any type of performance assessment, whether that comes through the learning journey or at the end of a learning unit. I'm sorry. And so the 5 building blocks are, first, you have to make sure and be clear that you are gathering or calling for evidence of learning that matters. Think of your higher order thinking skills. Think of your 21st century skills. Those are the skills that matter. Sure, students need to know information, or they need to know data, or they need to know facts. But we would say that a performance assessment might not be the best place to just assess those things. That's where you have your tests and your quizzes. You can still keep your standardized testing, but where are there opportunities in your curriculum and in your arc of the year or of the learning journey where students get to demonstrate learning, what they have in fact learned? The second criteria, building block or the Lego block, is that it should be tight on its criteria for success. Yes, that can be a rubric, but it could also just be a success criteria. It could just be a checklist. As long as you are clear what you are looking for in the beginning, Because once you're clear about what you're looking for, you can communicate that to students. And as Charity mentioned with that young student who was like, oh, I know how to do this, I know how to do this, I know how to do this. And so the student is in charge of their learning when you are able to clearly define what success looks like. The third building block is making sure that your performance assessments are open to different learner approaches. When I was with you all in Ghana at the Institute, I had you all, some of the folks who came to my sessions, I had you all think about a student that you want to center as you think about performance assessment and the ways in which you have to transform your teaching and leading. And what I came to find in listening to you all share which students were in the center of your heart is people shared students who maybe were a little bit fidgety and weren't quite the ones who sat still. There were some students who were new to Ghana, who had come from war-torn countries, and they were new to Ghana. And so they're learning English, they're learning all sorts of language and ways of being. And so it's important that in your assessment, you define what you believe is the success criteria, but you keep it open so that the learner can choose the best way that they can demonstrate their learning. Okay, and we'll go a little bit more into detail around that. The fourth criteria, the fourth Lego block, if you want to call it that, is that your assessment should be authentic. And that means kiddos should be doing something that is actually in the real world. I will say this, and I hope I don't offend anyone. I hope I don't offend anyone. But book reports are not authentic. People don't read literature because they want to write a book report. They read literature because they want to talk about it. They read literature because they want to create movement and dance around it. They read literature because they want to write a poem. So there's so many other ways that you can respond to literature and show that you understand what's happening in a story and with characters than a book report. Book reports are inauthentic. Nobody writes a book report, okay? Maybe you have them create a little trailer from their phones, a movie trailer, a little 2-minute movie trailer about the best part of the book. Like that is more authentic than a book report. So please, 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 please don't make me cry if I come to Ghana and they're doing book reports. Please don't do that. Okay, because I will be back in the summertime. And then finally, a performance assessment, a high quality performance assessment goes back to what Charity mentioned around reflection. It should be a learning experience in and of itself, which means that the learner should be able to talk about the ways in which they learned the material. Did they have to go get expert information from somewhere? Did they lean into talking with their peers or understanding, going more internal? It's deeply important that we allow students to reflect. Research shows that if you build metacognitive routines and structures in your classroom, students can gain up to 7 months of learning. So it's not focusing on whether they can do rote math or rote reading. It's, are they aware of when they are actually applying and using and gaining skills? Can they pause and reflect in order to know where they are in their own learning journey? We say that a learning experience should also give students an opportunity to get feedback. And feedback comes not just from the teacher, but also from their peers and also from their families and their caregivers and their community, right? My 6-year-old cousin taught me to read, right? Because nobody wants to hear a 6-year-old sound out small words. It's very frustrating to adults. She taught me to read. So she was giving me feedback as I was learning. And sometimes when children learn from their peers, that's actually the deepest learning. And then finally, we want to make sure that when you are designing for a learning experience in and of themselves, in and of itself, that you allow students to revise their work. Think about how much you are able to demonstrate what you know when you have to do something again, right? Maybe the first time it wasn't as successful, or maybe you missed the mark completely. But when you have to do it again, it makes you think about what changes do I need to make? How do I really demonstrate the skills that I'm supposed to be demonstrating or the learning that matters to me? And it helps to build persistence and resilience in our students, okay? So those are the 5 criteria. And I mean, oh, I didn't think I needed to go through all these slides. You all can get to the slides. It will be made available for you. Here is a wonderful link around the deeper learning competencies. So Envision, along with other organizations in the US, came together to really think about what are the competencies and the skills and the dispositions and ways of being, the 21st century skills that will set learners on their path to being deeper learners. So that's you can find those competencies there. And there's a beautiful workbook that shows you what it might look like in a classroom. And I'm going to offer that we also have a more detailed description of these criteria that also speaks to some of the research that's behind it. Okay. So I would love, I'm going to give you all an assignment, maybe. If you want to put in the chat any answer to one of these questions, which is a criteria that is present in the majority of the assessments, whether they're formative or cumulative or summative at the end of your unit that your students engage with. Or you can think about which criteria is least likely to be present. I will tell you in the US, a lot of our teachers have a really hard time allowing students to have choice around the assignments. And actually, I'm gonna go back on my word a little bit. I want to share what we mean when we talk about open to different learner approaches and choices. It doesn't mean that kids get to choose everything, right? Because then kids when you give them too much choice, then they're paralyzed, right? Like they can't make a choice, they can't make a decision. But you can have an assignment where students have to express their own views, right? What do you think about the mining that's happening in countries across Africa, right? What is your opinion of that after you do some research? You can have them choose something from their personal strength or their interests or their background. Maybe you have a student who really is into prosthetics and thinking about how do we make prosthetics for folks who've lost a limb. And so they want to delve into that. Students can also make decisions around their process. Do they want to work in a small group? Do they want to work more individually? Or you can help them decide how they want to demonstrate their learning. Do they want to write an essay? Do they want to create a slideshow? Do they want to put on a skit? I turned in college, I kid you not, I turned in, and instead of writing a 20-page paper, my professor for African literature allowed me to do an interpretive dance. And I have to tell you, it was way harder to do that dance than to write that daggone paper. I wish I had chosen the paper. But I learned so much about myself and my process and how to integrate the literature I was reading in order to make movement. And so these are some of the ways that we can provide choice. So I just wanted to double click on that. Laureen, I can talk about this all day. So tell me when to stop and be quiet.
No, we're
And
here for it. Give us the assignments.
Great. So the other thing you can do in the chat is which criteria would you like to learn more about as a leader and as a teacher? Because here's what I deeply believe. You cannot teach what you don't know. And so that means if we're going to be teachers and to me, a teacher is the lead learner in the classroom. And so you should be learning alongside with the kids. You certainly should be learning about the children as they're engaging. So I'm curious, which of these 5 criteria would you want to learn more about? So you can put that in the chat if you'd like, or which one is the one that's most present in your system already, or which is one that you is least present in your system. So thank you. If you would like to know more about what we can do, Envision, we can help you create a grad profile of those 21st century skills that involves the whole community. We can help you make that profile measurable with real concrete performance outcomes that are designed for the developmental level of your learner. We can also help you think about what's a culminating performance assessment system. Maybe you want to do portfolio defenses. Maybe you want to do exhibitions of learning. Maybe you want to do presentations of learning. We can help you do that. We can also help you use these Lego blocks for assignments that you already have as learners, as teachers. And so you don't have to start from scratch. You can just tweak one or revise one that students enjoy doing or you enjoy teaching. And then finally, we can help you develop the skills that it takes to be a 21st century educational leader, all right? And so you can find more about us on these QR codes. And That's it. That's what I got for you all. So I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. We actually just got one, well, something that someone wants to learn more about how to, I guess, implement authentic assessment when you're in a context that really values standardized assessments. And I think we know a lot about that.
Oh, is that you? Is that you want me to answer that?
Yeah, if you feel like, I'm just saying someone put that comment in, if you need a moment to think, that's fine, but I just thought it was worth lifting up because it's a real tension in a lot of places who aren't as comfortable with doing performance or authentic assessments because
Um,
they might not be able to measure them in the same way that they can standardized tests, right?
um, well, if I can speak to that, am I allowed to speak? Okay, great. So one of the things that I will tell educators is when students are doing a standardized test, let's say that test it takes 2 hours and it's given on May 6th of every year. What you are really assessing is how that student is doing during those 2 hours on that day. And so if the student has not eaten, if the student had a hard time getting to school, that's going to impact how they are able to represent the learning that they did for an entire school year. And so we put a lot of focus on these standardized tests, but they do not measure what we actually value and what we actually believe is learning. They're approximations or they're proxies for learning. However, if you were to ask a student, how can you demonstrate to me, or let's think about, one of the things that really comes alive for students is when you have them solve an authentic problem, right? So I've worked with some schools in Philadelphia where we noticed that some students, especially our Black girls, were coming to school late. And when we got them together and we were like, hey, what's going on? We realized that the bell schedule that the district had put together had the elementary school going first, and a lot of the girls were responsible for getting their younger siblings to school, which is why they were coming to school late. And when we asked them, what's an authentic solution that they can have to that, they created all sorts of ideas and it re-engaged them back into school because they had a problem to solve. And so when you think about authentic assessments, a place to start is, what is a challenge currently that kids in your community or maybe the larger community is facing? And I'm going to actually toss it to Charity a little bit, because I know, not a little bit, because I know you also have tons of experience doing place-based learning where you're really working with the community. And that's another way to really think about the authentic assessment. And let me just say this before I wrap up. I do not believe the purpose of education is for kids to do well on a test. I believe the purpose of education is for them to use their knowledge and skills and their talents and their gifts and their passions to make their communities, to make their world, to make anyone who comes in contact with them better, brighter, feel more capable, feel inspired, and encouraged. I've never seen a student leave a standardized testing assessment experience and feel jazzed and feel inspired. I have seen students present their learning to their families and show what they know, and to see the feedback and the pride in their families' faces. That is the evidence, I think, of true learning. So I'm going to pass it to you, Charity, and would love to hear, what would you say about this?
Yeah. So especially in the context of place-based learning, like you mentioned, we really want to also still, considering the context, as you kind of described in the Philadelphia school example, making sure that we attend to and consider the students' individuals' ways of knowing, considering how do they communicate and engage with the world. So if literacy is this idea where we use language to consume our world, to critique our world, and to contribute to our world, then how are we incorporating those same kind of ways of knowing? How do we incorporate ways for students to authentically consume what's happening in the world around them? How do we provide ways for students to authentically critique and also to contribute to? And so assessments, especially when we think about performance assessments and things that they can do and create and make, should, also perhaps they could, I don't want to say should, but they could be attached to calls to action to impact their local community. They could be attached to amplifications to not only just solve a problem in the environment that they live in, but to also lift up those bright spots in the community. And so a lot of the work that we do in place-based learning is anchored in creating projects that start by mapping the assets in the community and saying who are the elders, who are, the local shop owners, who are, the parents that are the most vocal in the community, who are the community leaders, where are the places that students spend their time, and how can we leverage those in making connections to the content that we know we need to teach. And so once you start with that connection, that's where that authenticity is going to really start to shine, especially in that place-based learning environment, or even just in project-based learning in general. Also authenticity it can take place in a scenario. Maybe you give students a mock situation. It's a pretend situation, but they're using the real life tools. They're using the tools that someone outside the school walls would be using to leverage that same content. So if an engineer is using a specific spreadsheet or software, maybe put your students in a scenario where they have to then learn that software, leverage that software, or whatever that specific tool might be. Really thinking back to that example about the book studies, like how are books explored in the walls outside of the classroom? Well, there are bookshops where people gather in the community. There are podcasts that discuss and break them down. There are screenwriters who take books and turn them into series on television and movies. So why not put students in those scenarios to also help kind of process what they're reading and things of the sort. So authenticity is really like who uses that content, how do they use it, and then so what can I do with the students to put them closer as possible to those authentic contexts.
Ooh, I love that so much. Thank
Yeah,
you for that.
pretty good.
I want to invite folks to put questions in the chat if you have any questions for our speakers. Charity, I'm coming back to you. I want to first let our audience know that even if you're not in a project-based learning context, all of the types of formative assessment that Charity mentioned are things you can practice, right? And there's something that we do a lot, especially in the project-based learning world, but we do it in the real world in our work with others, and that's like peer feedback opportunities. And I wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about the power of peer feedback, and maybe if you have an antidote of a time that you saw it be incredibly effective or profound for a learner and how it pushed them to grow. Alcine, I'm coming to you with something else next.
No, I immediately think of one specific student, a young Black man, young Black male. And like you mentioned in my introduction, that's really the focus of my work is what can we do to support Black males and debunk myths around their performance um, in most of the educational environments that we work in. And so thinking about peer-to-peer assessment, research shows that if you show one Black male how to do something and he does it well, especially if he learns it in a self-autonomous way or a self-directed way, that you've basically educated everyone in his circle, because he's not going to be the only one who knows that piece of information. And so when we talk about peer assessment, that always comes to mind. It's always easier, I feel, for students to hear a message from a peer in terms of, how well they're doing, or where they can make things stronger. As opposed to an adult who's, we're not colleagues, we're not peers, we don't hang out on the playground together, or, you don't know my Twitch handle or my TikTok handle, so why would I listen to you? And so, that power alone of peer-to-peer assessment is something that I really want us to consider as we think about even tomorrow's instruction. Is there a math problem or a daily language activity that you can get students to give each other feedback? Now, does this mean just go and say, hey, go talk to them about problem number one? No. It means that we want to then structure it. We want to perhaps first introduce this idea of giving feedback to a colleague, to giving feedback to a peer. And so we really want to point out and say things like, okay, what does it mean to be specific in your feedback without being mean or hurtful, right? And so that's when those checklists come in, or that's when that focused criteria comes in. And it's like, now go to a peer and give them feedback on problem number one, but look at how they lined up the equal signs. I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there, but giving a specific thing. Look at how they leveraged prepositions. Is it effective? Is it connected to what we talked about in the lesson? And so now, you can dig deeper and give time frames and say, you're going to talk for 2 minutes. I'm going to talk for 2 minutes. And now they're practicing skills of even active listening and being receptive. And so once you do that, the first couple of times are going to be rough, but don't give up, because as it goes on with time, they start to see, oh, my work is getting better because my friends are giving me feedback according to what I know I need to perform on, which is that checklist, that rubric, or, just this idea of knowing that we're in this thing together to make both of our works better. And so as that goes on, then that kind of builds the culture in your classroom, and you'll just see students using talk stems that you've given them, and sentence stems and sentence starters just in their natural day-to-day conversations with their peers. So just to kind of recap, is like, introduce the skill, teach them how to do it, and then your role is to give them feedback on the feedback that they're giving, and to make sure that you let them see and pause every now and then and do that metacognition and say, oh, my thinking is getting stronger because I'm thinking about my thinking with other people. And so, it's
Oh
just
my
this,
goodness.
yeah.
Yes. That was the perfect setup for my next question. But I do want to say, though, one thing when I first started having students give each other feedback, I was terrified because I was like, they're going to be terrible to each other or it's not going to be useful. But I learned that students really want to give each other feedback, and they give really good feedback when you give them the criteria. Like sometimes maybe better than I would have given in the moment because I'm reading hundreds of papers and they're just focusing on one or two, right? So it was such an impactful practice in my classroom. And I just can't underscore the importance. But I want to get to the metacognition, and Elsie, that's what I'm coming to you with, because something that's very important in performance assessment work is reflection, right? Like thinking about our learning. How did we grow over time? How do we know that we grew over time? And I just want to hear a little bit from you, similar kind of question. Can you share, does a particular story come to mind of someone, a student you had, or a student who was in your learning community who had a really powerful reflective moment on their learning? And that maybe, really reinforce the value around why we ask young people to reflect on their learning and give them the time to do that while they're in our classrooms or in our learning spaces.
Oh gosh, it's hard to just figure out or just land on one. Because, certainly, as you know, because we have taught together and we have led together, that was a really integral part of the school that we led together in Oakland, California. Let me think. Well, here's what I will say. I think that sometimes we want students to go from glory to glory in their learning process, mountaintop experience to mountaintop experience. We just want them to have success and just leap to the next success. And what I have found actually is that when kids experience some type of, I call it controlled failure, not that we fail them, but when kids realize, ooh, I didn't quite do what I needed to do in this moment, and I have an opportunity to redo it. Let me think about, okay, y'all, please, I'm going to deny if y'all say that I said this, but one of the things that I used to do when I was a classroom teacher, collaboration was deeply important for my students. And so I would allow them, the first time that we were doing collaboration, to pick their own groups. And I would not give them criteria. And so, as you can imagine, with high schoolers, they would pick their friends to work with. And we go through this 3-week project. And some friendships did not last the 3-week project because you got to see how students really engaged with each other and who did the work and who did not. But in that process, um, we would go through the project, and then the next time that we were getting ready for groups, I would have them do a reflection. They would do a self-reflection based on criteria, like, did the person meet the deadlines? Were they responsible for their part of the task? They would do a deep reflection, a self-reflection for themselves, and then kind of say, oh, am I a good collaborator? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, right? And then I would have them choose groups based on these criteria now. So now they're choosing their groups, but they have some criteria, and it's based on their own self-reflection. And what we would find sometimes also is that there were some kids that nobody wanted to work with. Not because they were not great kids, it's that they actually didn't have the work criteria, and like they hadn't developed those working skills. And the kids would give each other, when I would put them in groups, let's say we were working on a group project and every day we would work for a little bit on the groups. After each session, I would have them do a mini self-assessment. And they'd say, okay, these were the 3 skills. How did you demonstrate these skills? And they'd be like, oh, when such and such asked me to build on their idea, I contributed this way. And so they would write their reflection. I would also have them nominate someone in their group that really stood out. So they'd pick a most valuable player, an MVP. And so that was also a way for them to reflect on who was showing up according to our criteria. And then we would use that information to pick groups again. Now, here's the part I'm going to deny, right? There were some kids who never really understood how to do groups. And so instead, what we normally do as teachers, we will know that there's like 4 kids who don't do any work. And then we'll put each kid, we'll break them up and we'll put 1 kid in each of the groups that don't do work, right? We call them anchors, right? Your ship is trying to float on the water and then you drop an anchor. Now, I remember one time I did that, the very first time I did that, and one of my best students, Eliza, she got so upset. She's like, I hate when teachers do that. You always put a kid who doesn't do any work with me, and then I have to do the whole project, and I hate it. And I said, you're right. I'm sorry. I had to revise. I had to reflect. Why was I doing that? And so I went back, and I put all the kids who were anchors in one group. I put them all together. And then the next day we went, and the kids were like, when they got in their groups, they're like, why'd you put us all together? You know we don't do any work. And I said, well, controlled failure moment. One of y'all will have to learn how to make a group successful. And so when you can learn those skills, then you can go back into a group where everyone else already knows how to work in a group. And so in the first time I did that, I probably had 3 or 4 groups that were anchors. I'm not going to lie. It was hard. By the end of the year, I maybe only had 2 students who hadn't developed the skills to be a contributing group member. So what I would say to that is reflections happen in metacognition happens. You can make it happen in like nested dolls, right? Like when the big doll and then you open up and then there's another doll inside, another doll inside. Be clear though about what are the learning, what's the skills that you want students to be able to demonstrate, and give them opportunities to reflect on themselves like I did with those daily reflections, give them opportunities to reflect on how their peers are showing up, like what I did with their most valuable player. And then also give them opportunities to revise and rethink by now deciding who do you want to choose for your next group work and why. Okay. And so they're able to reflect all throughout in big and small ways. And so those are some of the ways that I would structure metacognition. And I also just want to go back to what Charity was saying real quick about formative assessment. I loved what you said, Laureen, about it being very scary. When I start to, not formative assessment, feedback, when I start the first time with kids or any adults, we don't know each other. And so I will contain the feedback to only positive feedback. So I might do that for the first 6 weeks. I might give critical feedback, but each other for peers, we only give positive feedback. And I think that's really important because when you can see the positive, then you also start to internalize what that might look like in your own work. When you hear the ways in which other people are also shouting out or shining or giving you praise for your work, or you're hearing the praise that other people are giving to others about their work, it makes you start to think about how I can do more of that in my own work. So that's an easy way that I get folks into feedback by only focusing on the positive.
Yep, thank you for that. I think I did something similar. It was mostly positive, but there had to be one recommendation for improvement that had to reference the rubric or the assessment criteria. It couldn't just be like, I don't like your writing. It was just
Yes.
like, you needed to add more supporting evidence or something like that. Yeah, I love that so much. I could talk about this stuff all night with you all, and we just have a few minutes left. So I want to really thank you both again for sharing your afternoon-ish evening with us. It's evening for us. And also just want to share with our larger community how fortunate we are to have like these two experts in learning and performance assessment, just sharing so much wisdom, and that they're part of our community as well. I'm sure they will be back next session. They'll be back next July to share more of their brilliance with us. So again, tonight we're talking about assessment for learning. Am I breaking up? I'm looking at faces. Okay. We talked about assessment for learning, formative assessment as a way to help us grow towards our longer term goal, and performance assessment as an authentic way to give students competency in their understanding and learning. We'll talk more about these things, I'm sure. And again, thank you, Charity and Alcine. I'm going to share a few things with you before we head out. Here we go. So we are trying to grow our community here at Ghana ASCD, and we invite you to join. You can join through our website. I'm dropping it in the chat. If you become a member, you get discounted conference registration fees, discounted face-to-face Saturday sessions, and we have one coming up next month. There's free monthly newsletters and access to our e-magazine, which will be coming out in the spring. We're really excited about that. Again, our focus on our series this year is around leading and teaching in learner-centered communities. We already had a webinar last month about getting to know our students and building relationships. We had our first face-to-face session in Accra that also focused on the importance of knowing your students. And then we just had our webinar on assessment for learning, and we'll be talking about assessment for learning in Kumasi next month. In January, we'll have another webinar, and then February, we'll have our face-to-face in Tamale. So we're coming up north to see you all where you are. If you didn't go to our YouTube channel where it will be living in, thank you so much for being a part of our webinar series. And we got through another one. And For those of us in Ghana, have a wonderful rest of your evening. For our friends and family in the States, enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. It's a funny kind of day in the States. So be safe, take care, and
Oh, uh-oh.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. It's great to see you.
Bye.